Welcome back, guys. So in our previous video, we installed our IDE and installed TypeScript on our system. And now we are ready to write some TypeScript code. We already know that TypeScript helps us write better code by using strict typing and various OOP features or object-oriented programming features that are not provided by JavaScript by default. But what do we mean by strict typing? What does it actually look like? So here we are going to write our first TypeScript program and understand what strict typing actually means. I'm going to start by creating a few files within our project, and the first file that I'm going to create is an index.html file. So once we have our index.html file created within our project, next thing we're going to do is create an index.js file, and we are going to start by writing a simple JavaScript program and gradually convert that to a TypeScript program. So let's create a JavaScript file as well. We have our index.html and we have index.javascript. In our index.html file, I'm going to write some boilerplate HTML code. So this is simple HTML document. Now I'm going to attach my index.js file to my index.html file. Now my index.js file is attached to my index.html file, and I'm going to go to my index.js file and I'm going to write a simple program. I'm going to write a function that takes in two numbers and adds them as a sum. Pretty trivial. So now my function takes in two parameters, a and b, and we're going to add these two. So this is a simple function that we have written in JavaScript. Now let's just simply execute the sum function and pass in certain arguments as a and b and see if it logs the sum to our console. So here I'm trying to add 2 and 3, log the value of the sum to the console. This A and B here are not typed by me. This is actually my IDE suggesting that my sum function needs two parameters, A and B. So don't get confused by this particular syntax. The thing that you see in white is suggested by my IDE. So it's not a JavaScript feature that we are using. It's just my IDE suggesting me that you need to pass in two parameters or two arguments, to this particular function. You're going to see this throughout the course, so don't be paranoid by this. So let's go to our browser and see if you're able to log the sum of 2 and 3 to our console. So you see we get 5 here. So what is the problem with this code? How TypeScript helps us to prevent errors in this code? Now let me explain that with an example. What if you're working in a team and someone tries to do something like this to this function? So instead of passing in numbers, someone tries to pass in strings. Now let's jump to our console and see if we get the same result that we expect. The answer is no. So instead of calculating the sum for 2 and 3, we end up concatenating 2 and 3. This is not what we expected. This is where TypeScript can help us. Now this problem might seem to be very hypothetical right now, and you may say that why someone would do this. But the thing is that as your application grows and you use more complex structures within your application, scenarios like this will emerge and they will be pretty common. And we will talk about those complicated cases and scenarios and walk through all of them within this course. But for now, let's see how TypeScript can help us avoid these kind of errors, or in particular, error within this function. And for that, I'm going to open my terminal and I'm going to create a new TypeScript file. Now we have our first TypeScript file created within our project, and this file is empty as of now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my index.js file. I'm going to copy all my code from the JavaScript file and paste it within the TypeScript file. And I'm just going to delete this JavaScript file over here. So with that out of the way, you already see that my IDE is shouting at me over here and giving me errors for A and B. Now it's saying that parameter A has implicitly typed of type any. Now we are going to understand types in more detail as we progress through the course. Now I'm going to refactor this code right now to comply to TypeScript standards, and will explain you in a moment what I'm trying to do over here. Let me first remove this console log. And here I'm going to refactor our function. This is a TypeScript function. What have I done over here? I'm explicitly telling TypeScript that any argument passed to this particular sum function of type A should be of type number and number only. So you cannot pass in any argument which is of type string. And for B as well, I'm expecting a number. So my sum function now accepts two arguments, and both of them would be of type number. The third thing that we need to look over here is that my function itself will return something which is a number itself. So whenever you have this kind of a notation following the parentheses of your function, it states what kind of value your function is going to return. Now this entire course is about assigning types to variables, functions, objects, and arrays, and so on. But this is the minimum syntax that I can show you right now to show you the advantage of TypeScript. Now I'm going to do a console log once again. And since our TypeScript file is now ready, I'm going to compile this TypeScript file into JavaScript. As we have already understood that TypeScript is not understood by your browser, the browser just understands JavaScript. So we have to compile this TypeScript file into JavaScript. Let's do that. I'm going to open my terminal, and in order to compile this TypeScript file to JavaScript, we have to pass a command tscindex.ts. Now what this does is it goes through the entire TypeScript and checks whether the code that you have written is TypeScript compliant or not. And then once it checks that the code is TypeScript compliant, it generates a JavaScript file just besides the TypeScript file that you tried to compile. So if we look in our project directory, we now have an index.js file along with the index.typescript file. Now I can go back to my browser and refresh it to see if these changes are effected there. You see, we get 5. And this is the result that we expected. Now this is all good and was working in JavaScript as well. And we are going to see what happens if we try to pass incorrect values to this function, or pass strings as we did in our previous example to this function, and how TypeScript helps us to catch those errors. And we are going to do this in our next video.